I always look for inspiration. I spend 50 hours a week on music. I don't only DJ in clubs. If you want to be at a certain level, you have to step out and take a chance. But the most important thing is to educate people. It's important for a DJ to take those journeys. I came up with this idea to marry straight ahead jazz and deep house. The music has come a very long way. It has verses, it has instrumentation, it has solos. And I was in tears and I knew that it was cool, very cool.
Welcome to Angel City Culture Quest, where art, social justice, and the environment meet in Los Angeles. I am your host, Melina Paris, and I welcome you to this episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Angel City Culture Quest. Today, we've changed it up a little bit, and we are talking to DJ Terence Toy, Vanguard of house music. Hi, Terence. How are you?
Good. How are you? Thank you for having me.
I'm good. Thank you for being here. This is going to be fun. I'm going to give a little background about Terence and his history playing house music, and then we're going to get into it. Unique, artistic, deep, and soulful. These are all appropriate descriptions for how Los Angeles DJ Terence Toy approaches his craft and how he has made a prominent name for himself throughout California, across the country, and abroad. Terence started spinning house tracks in the early 80s, back when the genre was progressing through major East Coast cities with velocity. The late New York house DJ David Bryant was a mentor to Terence and turned him on to the deep, funky sound of the underground scene. Bryant's perceptive advice to Terence was, to be really successful in this business, these are the grooves to play. Terence never looked back. To the benefit of his audience, Terence brings to his turntables his experience as a trained musician. He understands music theory and is an expert at reconstructing verses, bridges, and breaks. Terence is also an accomplished composer and producer of house music, including deep house, R&B house, gospel house, Afro-Cuban rhythms, and Afro-tech. Terence earned residency DJ status at Therapy in Montreal and Club Yellow in Tokyo. Locally, he spinned the tables in residency at Toy Box in Santa Monica, Does Your Mama Know on Sunset Strip, Release in San Francisco, and Paradise 24 in Hollywood, inducing house heads, Toy's term for house music fans, to dance. Terence also garnered a show on Los Angeles radio station KKBT in the early to mid-90s. His roots embody the style of New Jersey swing to the Miami sound to Chicago warehouse. The beats and tempos speak to him. Soulful, vocal house, and straight-ahead jazz have always moved him equally. His love and respect for jazz cultivates his eclectic, improvisational style, setting him apart from other DJs. More recently, in December, Terence played Ciclavia, the event that closes streets to cars and opens them to Angelinos, to use as a public park, connecting communities across LA, creating a safe space to bike, walk, skate, roll, and dance through LA County. In December, Terence played at Ciclavia in the Crenshaw district, and people were dancing in the streets and trying to Shazam your tracks, right, Terence?
That is correct.
That's so funny, and you had to tell him, these are your tracks, they're not going to be on Shazam.
Well, some of them are on Shazam, but just coincidentally, a few of the tracks they were trying to Shazam are not out yet, so they weren't coming up on Shazam.
Oh,
They
okay.
were successful in getting, I'd say, a good half dozen of the tracks from different people that were coming to the DJ booth area.
That's awesome. Well, I want to highlight a big project that you're about to launch. It's called Ill Atmospherics Seeks Refuge, a collaboration between your company, Refuge Recordings, with your partners, Samuel Saunders, and Ill Atmospherics, which is Carlos Fisher and Jay Claiborne.
Correct.
Now, you said this collaboration came about because you had a concept that you wanted to carry out for about a decade now.
It's been a little over a decade. I came up with this idea to marry straight ahead jazz with deep house, in essence. Not any particular style of deep house, but definitely straight ahead jazz. Simply because, as most people in the jazz know, that the straight ahead genre, it starts in one place and it goes to another place without turning around and repeating itself. So I thought that if I could figure out a way to infuse those styles, straight ahead jazz, with all of the genres of deep house, that I would be successful in moving the music to a higher plateau.
And the two seem to fit with the improvisational style of both.
Yeah, house music used to be all over the place, and now it's starting to take shape and form. So I come up with this idea probably more than 20 years ago. I just didn't know how to infuse the styles until I thought, bring in real musicians to play, which is not typical for house music. Most of house music is done on the computer.
And you said also that house music used to focus on only one or two parts of a song. So now, while you're among other DJs who are trying to do this, blending genres, you're the only one trying to do it in a strong way with straight-ahead jazz or house sound. And you coined a term for that.
I call it joust, which is the infusion of jazz and house. It's stuck. People have been utilizing it now for a while. They used to make fun of it, but now they've accepted this because you do hear other producers implementing solos, not necessarily on the jazz tip, but still solos. And solos can have that definition of being jazzy. So the music has come a very long way, and I'm trying to put my imprint on the music, house music, deep house, by sharing all the years of jazz that I have. I've been listening to jazz since I was 9-10 years old, and specifically listening to Latin jazz.
I wanted to mention the infusion and using live musicians in the work. Our track on Angel City Culture Quest, the opening track and what we close out with, is composed by Terence, and it's called Reasons, and it features the singer Rosebud. So we've been able to really have fun with that track and take snippets of it. Thank you for that. It's been great to use it.
Cool to hear it on there, especially you guys utilize that trumpet. Is actually a friend of mine that he's into jazz as well, and I would have to mention his name. He's my number one musician that I go to for any help and questions. His name is Brian Forbes, and he is an amazing musician. 98% of the solos you hear on Ill Atmospheric Seeks Refuge projects, those solos, especially the guitar solos, are all done by Brian Forbes. Amazing musician.
And that horn is beautiful.
He did that horn, I believe, on a Miles Davis plug-in, but he's still playing the track. That's still Brian Forbes doing that solo of the muted trumpet on the Rosebud song you guys used for your intro and outro.
That's great. Now, you also have this other song you composed. The track is titled Let's Get Jousy. And you said that that's a play on the original 1984 song called Let's Get Jazzy.
Correct.
We're going to play a snippet for the audience to hear.
A think to think, a pen to ink, a rage to uncage, glasses to clink. Wear high hats and boots and cats, like to sip, swing, and get down just like that. Move my odd feet, float over concrete, a jazzy joy to shift, sweet seats. Whatever you might say about the way I play matters not to me. With beats I flee to my private treat, resplendent. You can't end it, bend it, or try to send it. Never rend it from my grasp. My first and only task to ask, what brings all things together clever? That it's already done. Check the hum of the drum, sip the sky, get a taste of the bass. Cause this is jazz. Yeah. And that'll be my thing. Let's get jazz. Let's get jazz. Let's get jazz. Let's get down. Let's get jazzy now, come on, get down. Let's get jazzy now, come on, get down. Let's get jazzy now.
Cool, very cool.
That's great. And your version of Marvin Gaye's I Want You was entered into a Marvin Gaye remix contest, which
Yes.
you won.
That was a contest, and it featured Kipper Jones on vocals. I believe 60-something contestants. And I have to admit, Carlos, Jay, and I, we worked diligently on this remix, and we had a feeling that we would win. First off, the track I Want You is already at a decent tempo that can be comparable to house music. But once we realized Kipper's voice was just going to be the strongest point to carry it through, we just had an amazing time. That's Carlos on the drum pattern that I came up with. It was supposed to mimic a broken beat. And then that's Jay on piano. He's pretty much playing all the harmonic parts of that track, except when you hear the solo comes in, that's again Brian Forbes.
It comes together beautifully. And we're going to listen to that one too.
It's all I need. Ooh, too bad, just too sad that you don't want me, girl. But I wanna change your mind some way, somehow, baby. Ooh, I want you, and I want you. That way, baby. I want you, and I want you to want me too, baby. And I want you to want me, baby, just like I want you, want you. This one way to love is just a fantasy. Oh, sugar, to share is precious, pure and rare. Don't play with something you should cherish for life. Oh, baby, don't you wanna care? It's only out there. I want you, I want you, but I want you to want me too, baby. And I want you to want me, baby, just like I want you. Get down, baby.
Okay, so I wanted to mention, going back to the other song, the first one, Let's Get Jousy, you had some details in there that you said that it was your rendition on the original song.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yes. So originally, Louis Hale, he goes by the name The Hailstorm, which I think is an amazing take on his name. His last name is really Hale. So Louis Hale, he's a very reputable, impressive spoken word artist here in Los Angeles. And we conversed on the idea, and it was actually him that said he didn't want to cover the track, but that he would write his own lyrics explaining what jazz and house or joust is and could be. So no, it's not a cover of the Casey Flight track. It is our rendition or our version of it. That's why he only mentions "let's get jazzy" in the chorus. He's an amazing writer, Louis Hale. And that's not the first time that we've worked with him. We're just extremely proud of this track because it's the maiden track that explains and should explain to listeners, your listeners, my listeners, listeners around the world, what Joust is about.
It does, and it flows so beautifully. He's got a wonderful voice as well. That's a great song. And that leads me into the creativity. I want to discuss creativity and how that's what keeps artists going, especially in these times. You've always delineated yourself from other DJs. You paved your own road, and doing that has fueled your progress even before our current state with the pandemic. You said that the issue you're now facing is that the gigs are slowing down because of COVID, and you noted there's not enough venues to be doing your gigs outside. And, here we are in winter. It's difficult. So even with your following and your unique sound and your creative impulse and becoming, as you said, the Quincy Jones of house music, it's opened this door for you to embark on a new huge platform. And that's the Spotify platform that you're doing with Ill Atmospherics. And this is sort of what we've all had to do in our own ways, is we have to pivot.
I spend 40, 50 hours a week on music projects. I don't only DJ in clubs. Now, I have been blessed to have residencies in so many clubs over my 4 decades of being a DJ producer, more of a DJ than a producer. But it's so many elements you have to get in the trenches and do if you want to be a certain level DJ. I've had my hands in acid jazz. I was one of the resident DJs at Mushroom Jazz. When Mushroom Jazz was in its highest point, Mark Farina only wanted a half a dozen DJs, and I was the last DJ to gain that status of becoming resident at Mushroom Jazz. So you can't just focus on one element of a DJ because there's probably 100 different elements. You have to work on promotion, you have to work on producing, you have to work on your attitude, your appearance. It's a lot to do, but the most important thing is to educate people on music. And I say educate people on new music because that's always the foundation, is what is new, what's coming, what do the young and the old want to hear that they label as music. I mean, I pretty much love all styles of music, and not just saying that because I'm a DJ. But I listen to classical. Of course, I listen to jazz all the time. It's on in the car, in the house, on the TV. But I've been listening to jazz since literally 1970, 71. So it's important for a DJ to take those journeys of music that his parents listen to, that his children listen to now. I listen to reggaeton. I think it's brilliant, reggaeton. I wish I could produce some reggaeton, but I do listen to it. I listen to hip hop. I've been listening to hip hop. I listen to rap. I listen to drum and bass. I don't just listen to 1 or 2 artists of these various styles. I listen to dozens of classical artists to see what they were trying to introduce in their time, because at that time, their music was new. That was the innovative thing. When Beethoven and Bach and these musicians were creating music, people thought their music to be, I'd say, interesting and new. And it's the same thing now with Joust, getting people to understand that this music should be made as music and no longer as just samples of tracks from the 80s. The guys that I look up to, they're all producing music that have theory, music progression. It has verses, it has instrumentation, it has solos. And that's where the music is going and needs to go in order for the music to keep elevating.
And who else do you know that's in this movement?
Definitely in California, besides my partners, Jay Claiborne and Carlos Fisher, you have David Montoya, who produces, and he's making waves with it. Evan Landis and his crew are producing some very interesting songs, moving the music along. Will Real Soul Rodriguez is moving the music along, and that's just in LA. My favorites, pretty much South Africans. You got DJ Manu, you have Black Coffee, you have the Jeff. It's finally being accepted. They needed a good 100 DJs around the world to be cavalier enough to take that chance to not want to still create the same style of house. It takes little Louis Vegas and certain DJs around the world to basically step out and take a chance, get their feet wet. And that's what I'm trying to do here in LA.
If you're just tuning in, we're talking with DJ Terence Toy. Thank you for listening. Hello, culture lovers. This is your host, Melina Paris. For several months, we have been bringing you inspiring guests along with stimulating content about their work. As with anything, there are costs to keep this podcast going. So if you're able, join me in this quest with your support. Think of it as a cultural tip jar to share any amount that you're comfortable with. Or you can make a regular offering with as little as $4 a month. This will contribute to my ability to continue bringing you the great work of these artists, activists, and others, plus the cultural content that you want to hear about. I appreciate you, and I would be honored to have your support. To join, please go to our Patreon link at patreon.com/Angel City Culture Quest. There, you can also see all of our past episodes, get early announcements, and find more perks to come. Thank you. So you've been playing African and South African, Afro-Cuban, and house music for a long time. And the first aromatherapy was back in the 90s. Can you talk a little bit about that?
The first aromatherapy came out in 1995. In Vancouver, Canada in 1999. That went for a couple of years, but it was difficult to be going back and forth to Vancouver. At that time, I had a son, so I had to be a little more responsible with my fatherhood than my musichood. So
you have a goal, though. You want to get house music into a category for the Grammys, right?
Yes, where they specifically call it house music, not dance music. The music comes from the Chicago Warehouse, very well-known gay club in the early 80s. And they took the suffix house from the Warehouse. And I don't think that they should change the name and call it dance music. I think that they should make a category. Now there's a trillion DJs and a trillion producers all putting in their 2 cents with this music. I think it deserves its own category, either house or deep house, one or the other. I prefer house because the club wasn't called the Ware Deep House. It was called the Warehouse. And here we are now in 2022. It should be a category in the Grammys, the Latin Grammys. We call it Casa Musica. I don't know, but it's time.
I want to just talk about one of your other songs here, Love is a Losing Game. Can you talk about how that came about? And then we're going to also listen to that.
Yes, I always look for inspiration to come from any and everything. I used to not do that. I used to just only focus on the music at hand, house music, other DJs, other producers, house music. But then the first time I actually came up with the idea of this track from the Amy Winehouse movie. I thought, wow, that's a beautiful song. I wonder who I could find to cover this song with an amazing voice to give it justice since she's no longer here with us. And then I found the perfect vocalist, John Michael. I had worked with John Michael before. I sent him the first rough draft of the track, and he sent back his take vocally on it. I listened to it at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was in tears, and I knew that it was this artist representing Amy Winehouse.
It worked. He's so emotive, his voice. It really is. It's a beautiful song. And there is also a flamenco house version of it too, right?
Yes, that's the one that's been getting the most attention is the flamenco house. Again, Brian Forbes opens up the track with the flamenco guitar.
Mm-hmm.
And we immediately go into the riff patterns of flamenco cajon drum patterns. And we wanted to keep it simplistic so it could let John Michael's voice shine.
And it does. Let's listen to it now. Beautiful. And there is one more song we're going to share by an artist, Karina Nestal. The song is called Wiser.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, Karina, she has a beautiful voice. She's a Latina woman, and she sings various genres of music, Latin included. So she originally did this song as an acid jazz, down-tempo R&B track. And I wanted to change it to house music, like joust track. But I couldn't come up with a genre that matched her voice perfectly. And actually, a friend of mine who teaches music, I grew up with Ashanti from 5th, 6th grade. His brother, older brother, Alaman, he gave me my first jazz album. And it was a Latin jazz album. So that's why I focused on Latin styles for Karina's voice. And between Ashanti and I, we came up with a samba style. It's a slow New Jersey swing take on samba. And she loved it, and we just took off from there with her approving. Again, the original version is a much slower R&B tempo. And we bumped it up to about 118 BPM to give it that samba feel.
And you had the guitar solo and...
Brian Forbes again.
Yeah, that's great. Let's give it a listen. The snippet of Wiser by Karina Nestal.
I'm learning to cut out unnecessary things, whatever weighs on me, whoever drains my energy. Time is fleeting. I've spent enough of it agonizing. Something that turned out to be nothing. Captivating. Life can be eye-opening, exhilarating, breathtaking and grounding. Giving exactly whatever we are reflecting. Whether it's downbeat, kick it back to the upbeat. 'Cause I know my time is limited. I ain't got no time for no nonsense. Feeling blessed and positive, 'cause I know anything is possible. 'Cause I'm wiser than yesterday. Everything I've lived ended up benefiting me, making me wiser than yesterday. to the finer things, finer things, finer things.
Can you talk a little bit more about the collaboration and the upcoming Spotify page?
So the whole concept was to create a miniature orchestra. And I was introduced Carlos and his brother, Jay. They're from Columbus, Ohio, I believe. And I met them through the radio station. And so I'd already put together a dozen musicians to work with. They loved the idea and they signed on with me. Nick Smith, Manyungo Jackson, of course, Brian Forbes, Ashanti Dykes, Jesse Outlaw, and there's a few other. I'm constantly looking for musicians, but the reason is that we're trying to create a band or an orchestra. So it's imperative that we have real musicians. It can't just be Carlos, Jay, and I playing these instruments on the keyboard and on the computer, because it's going to always give it the Carlos, Jay, and Terence sound.
Yeah.
My idea is to constantly have a revolving orchestra, revolving band, revolving group of various musicians. I meet musicians in front of the grocery store. I met a kid at Union Station named Flozart. He's an amazing young 22-year-old pianist. So we have so many songs. The show would be 6 hours long, but the concept is to use live musicians and to let those live musicians shine. Let them have their turn, so people, when they ask about a solo or the playing of an instrument on our tracks, we can then consistently say Ashanti Dykes, Brian Forbes, Manyungo Jackson, Nick Smith. We're not trying to make this where one person is creating all of these various styles of music funneled down into this one song or track of joust or jazzy house. We want jazz musicians to play on these tracks. We want real singers that sing jazz and R&B to sing and perform on these songs. It's not about us anymore. We've let that go so we can venture off into this joust jazzy house thing. And it wouldn't make sense to use any parts of the word jazz and not let it be where the real jazz musicians are not performing on our songs. It wouldn't make sense.
That is completely logical. It's a great idea, a wonderful collaboration of all kinds of artists in different kinds of genres of jazz. It's a beautiful concept, and people are going to be able to go to this on Spotify.
Yes, the Spotify page should be launched any day. I would imagine by the time the show is aired, your show, which again, thank you for having me on your platform.
Yeah,
by the time it airs, the Spotify page will be up. It should have at least a dozen representations by that time, if not more. We have probably a few dozen tracks, as well as we're working on at least 2 dozen more tracks now. The show is not a 6-hour mini-series.
Yeah, but that's great. I mean, it's like a host for creativity and musicians. It just sounds wonderful. And we're going to have that link as soon as it's available in our show notes so people can go to it and check it out. Now, can you let everybody know where to find you in the meantime?
Well, of course, my website, terencetoy.com. I'm pretty much on every platform. You can find me on SoundCloud, Mixcloud, Pandora. But we try to navigate people to my website. Of course, I'm on Instagram and Facebook, mostly on Facebook. I let my son handle Instagram because I want to focus on making music and not being on those platforms. I try to mention something about projects on there here and there, but I try also to do other styles of promoting. So Terence Toy, T-O-Y. Of course, the Spotify page will be Ill Atmospherics Seeks Refuge. We have Refuge Recordings, we have Ill Atmospherics, and you have Carlos, Jay, and myself, along with Jesse Outlaw. That's really the nucleus of what makes up all of us. That's the platform, the foundation for ISR, abbreviation Ill Atmospherics Seeks Refuge. We always shorten it with just ISR.
That sounds good. Well, I would encourage all my listeners just to go and check out the music, and you're going to be blown away. You'll hear something new and exciting, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Thank you, Terence Toy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and recommend on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.